Hello everybody and welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. And today we're going to be taking a look at a piece from the latest issue of Hedgerow from Erica Ison with the first line of No Deer This Evening. It's a wonderful, mysterious piece, and we'll get to it in just a moment because you know what time it is now. It's time to grab yourself a tasty beverage, sit back, relax, and let's haiku. Welcome back, everybody. It's good to be with you again for another episode of Haiku Talk. This piece is a wonderful piece. Well, let's look at it and let me read it to you, and then we'll get into why I find it mysterious and so intriguing. The poem goes like this. No deer this evening, only their traces in the long grass. No deer this evening, only their traces in the long grass. I really, really enjoy this piece. And it's mysterious to me. It's mysterious because normally on this channel, when I break down a poem, there's a very clear delineation between how it's constructed, between what the two images are, what the tension is, what the cut is, whether it's the fragment or a phrase, or we have a middle pivot or something like that. And I usually pick poems that really speak to me and have a good way to kind of talk through that structure. This one, I think I'm so captivated with the moment that it's hard for me to even think about breaking it down into its structure. Because there really isn't a hardcore separation of images. The whole thing kind of works together and snaps together. And if there's anything that's happening, it's the recognition of something that's absent by something that's present. And it's the tension between the absence and presence that is so fascinating. And that's really hard to do. It's not an easy kind of poem to write. And it just excites me when I see something like this. Like you recognize something is amazing when you see it. And this is one of those poems that I'm like, wow. I can't say that I of myself have ever written something like this. I don't come across things like this too terribly often. So, yeah, let's just take a look at the poem. We're going to go through it line by line like we normally do. But I think the essence here and why it's so fascinating is that it's the recognition of the absence of the deer by the presence of their trace in the long grass. That's so cool. That's just so cool. Like how did Erica come up with this? Wow. This is something I'm gonna put in the back of my own little workbook to try to work on and work through and see, if somehow I can manifest this type of poem at some point in the future, because it's super cool. So line by line, if you look at that first line, no deer this evening. No deer this evening. Okay, it's a nice kind of a statement. It's not just an image, it is more of a statement. There's no deer this evening. We don't know where we are, we don't know why, we don't know what the context is, it's just a statement. No deer this evening. Now the implication is that normally we might see deer, and for some reason we don't see the deer. So there's no deer this evening. We go on to that second line. Only their trace. Only their trace. Okay, now I'm a little intrigued. Now I know that there's no deer this evening, but there's something there that reminds me that they were there, or or that they do exist. It's not a figment of our imagination, that the deer do exist there. So you go to line 3, in the long grass. In the long grass. And this is where they've left their presence. This is how we know they existed. This is how we know they were there, because they've left a trail in the long grass. And not just a trail, but just their trace. And again, that's so cool. It's a poem about the thing that's present is the absence. We have the remnant of them being there. So we know that they existed, but you're left with just the trace in the long grass of deer. This is one that you can really sit with for a long time. Kind of like the last week's where we had talked about the different ways that we kind of cover ourselves or make up stories about ourselves or hide ourselves or change ourselves. In this case, it's the things that we're left with, those reminders around us that something that we're used to seeing normally on a routine basis that would be here. But when you arrive to that spot, that thing, that person, they're gone. They simply aren't there. And yet, we know they existed. We know they were there. Because they've left some remnant, some trace of their existence. And, man, this is where the beauty of haiku comes into play, because it sets a nice thing on the surface level, a nice scene that's unfolding. We are there where the deer normally are, where they used to be, where they and we just see the remnants of them. And so we're in the presence of their absence. But then, because there's space in the poems, and because there's the point of a haiku is not to linger and be specific to the poet's story. We're left to fill in the spaces. We're left to, or we're given permission, maybe that's a better phrase. We're given permission to invest ourselves in the scene and fill in spaces with our own story. And so, this as I'm reading this, and I'm sure, I'm curious if things come to you and you want to share them, please put them in the comments. But like something for me that comes to mind is like driving by an old house that I lived in. It's like that's where I used to be. Like even go even deeper. That I'm divorced, so I look at this old house where I had a marriage and a life and a future and dreams and hopes and ambitions and all that stuff. And that used to be there. I used to go down the street, used to go into this driveway, would walk into that door, walk into that house, and there was a life there. And now I go to that house, which is no longer mine. It's no longer there. That whole world, that whole thing doesn't exist anymore. It's just the trace is there because I still see the house. I still see the street. I still see the sidewalk. I still see the front door. But that whole life is no longer there. But I know it was there. I know it existed. And this house is proof of that to me. It's a place that I went to for, 17, I don't know, many years, 15, 16, 17 years, lived in that house. And that's just where my own story takes me. Now, Erica Ison would have no idea that I would ever, that her poem could take me someplace very personal like that. That's completely out of her knowledge of doesn't even know I exist, much less what my story is. But this is the power of haiku, and this is the power of this form, is that I'm drawn into this experience that Erica has shown me, but yet that feeling, that moment of being in the presence of absence, you know, takes me to other areas of my life. And that, for whatever reason, is the first one that I get to, you know, which is a very powerful thing, you know, to kind of sit with for a while and just remember and just, golly, And I know we all have things like that in our lives. We all have moments like that where we can go to some place where on a day-to-day basis, on a routine, we were there, we experienced things. And we go to that same spot, and that thing, in this case the deer, or the deer could be whatever it is that you're expecting to see, is not there. And you're left seeing a trace of it. And left with that moment. In this case, this haiku moment of the presence of absence. It's powerful stuff. That's powerful stuff. So yeah, I'd be curious if there's a moment where this, like of you experiencing the deer that are there but not there, but then where else this might have taken you in your own life. Now, I know it's a fun thing. Whenever I'm in a couple writing groups, and especially one of my writing groups that I'm the only haiku poet in, it's always interesting to see, because I got a lot of fiction writers and such in that group. It's always interesting to see where the poems take the people in the group, and they come up with usually some really great, elaborate stories about where they are, where the poem takes them, where it drops them in their lives. And I feel like that right now. Like if I was in a room with Erica Ison and we read this poem, and I'm like, and then I go into this thing about the house that I used to live in my marriage, like how amazing that might be to her to hear that, to hear where her poem took me. And that's what these poems are supposed to do. Yeah. So it would be interesting to see where this poem took you. And that, my friends, wraps up another episode of Haiku Talk. Thank you all for tuning in once again. Like this if you liked it. Think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet subscribed. And ring the bell for notifications for you subscribers so you get notified once new episodes arise. Until then, may you enjoy this piece, and may you sit with your presence of absence wherever that takes you. Until next week or next time. Peace.